ready to start.
Yeah, are you going to?
I am.
Plan the executive branch of the United States federal government ought to prohibit the extraction of fossil fuels from federal public lands and waters leased under the Willow project. The Willow project is a massive chemical field project federal public land 123. The Willow project will allow chemical fields to drill oil on public lands in Alaska, Berkeley, Camping, Alaska. There will be no new drilling on federal land, and the BLM does the Apple go to a net of 22. BLM is the largest federal public land manager leasing the public lands to oil and gas industry, and it's in charge of BLM and ODA. BLM manages public lands under its jurisdiction of the FLPMA, and fossil fuels are defined by the EPA. EPA 13 fossil fuel definition: oil, coal, and natural gas. Advantage 1 is biodiversity. The Willow project wipes out Alaskan ecosystems, habitat, noise pollution, spills, and collisions. Williams 23. Willow project harm wildlife has been into previously undeveloped Alaskan country with multiple species like gulls, dramatic habitat loss, extreme patterns, green noise, and light pollution. Oil spills, destruction of health, and abandoned habitats, wiping out entire populations of projects like the cost forest wells, destruction of further miles of farmers and extra processing facilities, high customers, pollution increases, putting wildlife at risk. And it's not just Willow, because infrastructure and precedent from Willow paves the way for Alaskan oil expansion. Bergen 23. Beyond acknowledged Willow pressure water supplementation on projects that want to drain down actively system neighboring infrastructure would be the development of the ACU. Beyond identified basically foreseeable future actions, including West Willow and Harbor consideration, individual projects back into price context oil. Always price to open the entire region. Near development and opening this area because substantial environmental harm and Alaskan biodiversity is key to global ecological systems. Being 21. Alaska is recognized for large trust and intact habitat and important facility long-term biodiversity and development support of economic which is a state global priority for large and also the rate of mass migration of animals in Alaska. Host available in the center, rating troubles, 50% of offshore prisons of the American water prisons, and maintaining populations of also and maintaining population from mass greater ecological resilience to those semi-ready reach within ecosystems and reaching tree growth and carbon separation and development watershed represented globally significant conservation opportunity and biology loss causes significant ecological collapse. So 21. Ecosystems are the foundation for human life. We depend on the services they provide ecosystems and all the measure of impact on its resilience beyond its into ecosystems will have ecological loss across the end of a civilization on Easter Island. Today's how the community will local desertions and better harmony raise this way. It's the environment collapse of ecosystems will realize on balance and social beyond the threshold of conservation and not the catastrophic transformation advantage to its Arctic core. Mountain sea ice entry to geopolitical incentives making mountain a hotspot for interest between great powers. Baby 22. Shrinking sea ice wave minerals and Arctic will also be the target for evaluation under Russian parliament debated Alaska be returned to Russia and deteriorating relationship with mineral powers from Mainland. New shipping pathways for ancient hydrocarbon and mineral resources establishment. China's been Egypt establishment of a new Arctic state partner with Russia. Russia's intensive and distance between China and Europe and U.S. Arctic readiness is key to determining Russian China's fragile but recovering now. Baker 22. Russia's invasion of Ukraine competition in the Arctic could intensify federal investment in the Middle East with deep water having the main U.S. during Russia's shooting SVG Russia's aggressive military expansion in the Arctic, the Peninsula once when Soviet investments does in the 30,000 Alaska and more advanced than any elevation with continental dominance Navy developed a plan for protecting American interests weakness challenged by Russian China and Willow does Arctic readiness by shortening adaptation times and mounting Arctic ice. Heidi 23. Adversaries capitalism will also see these executives are not just the U.S. inability to assert military presence in the Arctic. The Navy lost vessels capable of operating in the sea as the U.S. is unprepared for Willow. Coast Guard failed to respond to our request for ice breakers and oil infrastructure and national security. As advancing Willow without adequate security with increased adaptation times by Arctic other subsurface solar radiation maritime traffic will also be able to also directly isolate and melting. This will decrease the time required to save increase the lands of the Arctic areas Arctic lands and U.S. interest and Arctic competition goes nuclear interest great power drawing Rapid 23. Nuclear relations in the Arctic island sample cannot be condemned with the equal section of melting polar ice and the Arctic competition Arctic territory increases as NATO Russia and China is increasing economic disruption and engaging governments against the U.S. to Ukraine high nuclear to those nuclear race and stable conventional all of that is necessary security which opening is the vast oil and gas deposits nuclear polymer days unstable marine infrastructure more powerful than geological nuclear policies reception isolated regional focus on isolated digital nuclear property isolation reliance on political bargaining is opposed to rationality features just reason for resources in the Arctic making prices nuclear prices and doctrine and implementing the Arctic war goes nuclear business is exacerbated by 0.001% as my trade. I'm good. Cut the card at, wait.
What's the internal link to Arctic War?
Yeah, we say that right now melting sea ice has turned the Arctic into a hotspot of Arctic.
Okay, so how does the plan solve melting sea ice?
What?
How does the plan solve melting sea ice?
The plan would stop the Willow project from specifically accelerating melting sea ice. We say that obviously, like, climate change might gradually lead to, like, the Arctic ice melting, but by then, for example, California, Florida would already be underwater because it would be like 100 years later, whereas the Willow project immediately emits black carbon, which goes onto the ice.
Okay. All right, I guess, what is hedonistic act utilitarianism?
We would just say that it's maximizing expected well-being.
What does that look like? How do you measure well-being? Can you explain the no intent foresight distinction argument?
We would just say that foreseeing consequences makes it become part of our deliberation, i.e. like, we might foresee that X thing is going to happen.
So how does it make it intrinsic to the action?
Because if I think about something and I'm like, this thing will have consequences, then that affects whether I do that thing or not. For example, if I touch my hand on a burning hot stove, before I do that, I would think, wow, that would hurt. That makes my decision affected by whatever I perceive.
I guess the Alaska biode stuff, can you explain why Alaska is key to global ecological systems?
Excellent. It specifically talks about why Alaskan biodiversity is globally significant. It cites like it's a global priority for large mammal assemblages.
Yeah, but why is it a global priority, Bar? I'm just saying.
And it says that no other place on Earth has as many healthy, diverse populations.
Okay, so a lot of animals live there. All right, I guess. And how does the Willow project kill biodiversity in Alaska?
That's the first two cards. The Willow project wipes out Alaska.
Right, but the Willow project is like a tiny little sliver at the top of Alaska. How does that like affect like all of Alaska?
That doesn't, like, if you want to read evidence that says that, you can, but we have read specific evidence that says the Willow project harms biodiversity. That's the Williams 23 evidence. It talks about how disruption can cause animals to abandon habitats, wipe out entire populations of those animals on the Willow project land, and it also talks about like how it expands into areas where there are a lot of vulnerable species that causes habitat loss, disturbs normal animal patterns and behaviors, creating moist light pollution, etc. Oil spills, toxic pollutants, these are all things that would increase biodiversity.
I guess what is the scenario for Arctic War, I guess? Like, who's fighting? Why?
We say that right now there are multiple nations that are interested in the Arctic. For example,
so why are they going to fight?
The Baker 22 card specifically talks about how.
Yeah, I know, but why are they going to fight?
Literally, that's the entire when I see advantage. Do you want me to repeat everything?
I want you to tell me why they're going to fight and who's going to fight.
Baker 22 says rare minerals and the Arctic's substantial reserves of fossil fuels are becoming a growing target for exploration, etc. It also talks about.
But why does that mean they're going to like nuke each other?
Arctic competition goes nuclear. That's the Roundtable 23 evidence. That's really good in talking about how specifically nuclear relations in the Arctic are unstable and can't be contended with like classic deterrence theory. So that means things like mutually assured destruction no longer check back for it because there's growing competition for territory and resources. And for example, like China's increasing economic interest, Russia's like threatening to use like nuclear use. They've been specifically interested in the Arctic post-Ukraine, which is Baker evidence. And these are all like examples as to like great powers that be interested in.
I sent the document.
Is like.
It's gonna be 4 off-case positions, biodiversity, Arctic.
I'll let you know when I get it. Oh wait, actually it's in the speech. Let me just. I'm good.
Are you ready? Okay. There's set timer.
At least 34 states ought to petition for a constitutional convention, and at least 38 states ought to ratify a constitutional amendment that prohibits the extraction of fossil fuels on federal public lands and waters leased to the Willow Project. It stalls without runaway conventions to Arbin 18. The states would choose delegates, opponents exaggerate chances of runaway conventions or remotely sees the court as unsurmountable. Best case scenarios, magnitude might give snakes less scope. Delegates could discover angles. Elites look to the Fed media, which reflect elite opinion, paid scant attention, even though convention proved that the serious system responded to demands while avoiding politics. Levinson and Moyer 7. We need a convention because Congress is busy. These issues take significant time and energy. A range of issues issues are competing for time and attention. The United States refers to the federal government. The federal government clearly identified in articles as the U.S. USA. The 50 states U.S. use commonly consistently throughout Title 28 to refer to federal government in D.C. Title 28 statutes govern all federal courts, supreme law of the land. And Econ High now, Glover 1110. U.S. growth strong, higher growth rates, surprising resilience, roaring 20s growth, GDP expanding at its fastest pace in 2 years to last quarter. Inflation cooled from highs. Ending the Willow project kills the economy. Loris 23. Willow create 2,500 jobs, drawing support from labor unions and building trade organizations. U.S. oil supply will increase by 180,000 barrels of oil per day, helping lower prices at the pump, generate up to $17 billion in resource revenue, restricting development. The U.S. will shift production to countries with far worse environmental standards and higher greenhouse gas emissions intensity per barrel produced. Restrictions deny access to more than half of the energy-rich Alaskan energy, and the plan destroys the economy, eliminating production of oil and gas and coal on federal lands. Would increase energy prices. Impact would be immediate and severe to U.S. economy. Loss of a quarter of nation's coal, oil, and gas. Loss of $11.3 billion in annual royalties, $70 billion in GDP. Threatened loss of 100,000 direct jobs with energy on federal land, impacting 280,000 jobs across the economy. Several states affected. U.S. is key to the global economy, largest economic activity, size on the dollar, hardling 22. When America sneezes, U.S. economy still has major impact on global markets and the confidence of investors. U.S. economy determined nature of any recession size matters. Accounts for a large global economic activity. World's largest importer developments of U.S. dollar is leading reserve currency. Dependency on dollar is why U.S. determined economic narrative. U.S. fuel inflation around the world and recessions cause global war. The occurrence of war depends on trade expectations. Expectations directly determine whether the world can continue to maintain a peace in the future of a country's expectation of a future economic environment or negative. Realism will come. Operative countries tend to believe without access to raw materials and investment economies will begin to decline. If a country enters a severe recession, its leaders will think conflict is a reasonable choice and blows up every hotspot. Chem 10. Economic situation worse in India, China, and Japan suffer a reduction in growth. Political unrest or nurtures radical groups collapse. Pakistan extremists take nukes. War between India and Pakistan increase. Iran weaponizes that, enhances role of the Middle East. Major disruptions with direct consequences for the planet. And Ukrainian passes now. Biden is pushing for. Danishevska 1118. United States likely to allocate new aid package to Ukraine no earlier than mid-December. Supporters in Congress are engaged in fierce battle for a large aid package. Congress expected to approve new aid to Ukraine in mid-December. Both parties plan to work on arrangement and agreement in coming days. We need to push ourselves to negotiate. Congress must act on a timeline that's going to matter. Biden proposed allocating $106 billion, and there's Republican support but it's not certain or guaranteed. Mascaro 11-2. Johnson told senators that Ukraine aid will come quickly in the House. GOP senators all like the speaker. We want him to be successful. Johnson told senators the next order of business would be Ukraine. Johnson echoed Congress would not abandon Ukraine. We want Ukraine to win, but we've got to do these things in a responsible manner. He said conservatives like what they heard, and Willow is enormously popular across the board with legislators. The plan kills Biden's political capital by forcing him to act against his own party and Republicans. There is widespread political support for Willow project from Republican politicians. Legislators claim the project would create jobs and boost energy production. All three lawmakers in Alaska's congressional delegation urged Biden to pass the project, and it trades off Lavelle 21. Federal lands have become smaller while private land has stirred. A ban was stir up a firestorm that hurt Biden, especially in swing states with substantial leasing. New Mexico and Colorado leasing has taken on symbolic importance. Biden's decision to avert shutdown over leasing reflects the decision to spend BC on steps that have greater impact. New Mexico Governor Grisham passed the White House for relief. A ban would push drillers to Texas where private land more accessible. A federal judge struck down the moratorium. Democrats could be vulnerable. Americans are not trying to decide where oil comes from. When they hear oil ban, they think most oil, not a small percent Republican opponents use to undermine overall climate efforts. Delays in USA linearly embolden Russia. Prince 1117. Ukraine's performance could be impacted. U.S. by far Ukraine's largest supplier. Each week that passes, our ability to give Ukraine tools to defend and make advances gets harder. Ukraine is struggling to drive Russian forces off. The failure of the U.S. to come through with aid would severely shake the coalition supporting Ukraine and embolden Putin. World War III, Season 23. The U.S. must pursue peace through rank isolation. Failure to resist Hitler's rise and fight a world war. The same will be true if we allow Putin to seize Ukraine. If we help Ukraine prevail, we rewrite the narrative of weakness, restore deterrence with China, strike a blow against Sino-Russian alliance, stop a nuclear arms race, and make World War III less likely. An interpretation the affirmative must end all fossil fuel extraction from federal lands and waters. If fossil fuel extraction still occurs on federal public lands in the world of the app, it is not topical. Prohibit requires a complete stop. Element 6. Prohibition and regulation are different. To prohibit implies putting a stop. Regulation applies sales shall go on within the bounds of a certain prescribed rules. Vote neg. 1 is precision. Our interprets the most accurate reading of the resolution. That's key to avoid arbitrariness, which controls the internal link to all of their offense. Both doctrinal adjustment structurally favors the affirmative, and 2 is limit subsystem lockouts that permit individual lands and waters, which each require distinct case negs. Tiny picks are not competitive, and if bad, you can beat them with theory. 3 is ground. Links to this require large shifts from the status quo, which the app will defend, forcing the negative process counterfeits in case causes stale debates that the app can be over-prepared for. Use competing interpretations. Reasonability is arbitrary and invites such intervention. Collapses to use offense and defense to evaluate the paradigm, and the violation is obviously that they only end extraction on lands leased to the Willow project, which is only in Alaska. Bye, Eddie. 1. Willow will scale down and doesn't produce for years, but it's key to energy security and the economy. Current projects thumb. Weber 23. U.S. reduced Willow oil, substantially denying 2 drill sites, ruling to right 68,000 acres of leases. Approval shift in energy policy reflect changes in energy security from Ukraine, notwithstanding environmentalist administration not yet abandoned wartime pragmatism operating, producing 500,000 feet. Left to first oil from Willow comes 2029, processing with infrastructure to make other deposits develop. 2. You know the Willow project is a super small part of Alaska as it is. You should be skeptical of the scope of their impacts, especially since you know that it would only hurt animals on the lands nearby. 3 is that they'll shift to private land. Press 20. Production on private state and tribal land not covered by federal policy. Oil and gas is more price responsive, reducing production offset by surges elsewhere. 4 is all causes other Alaskan projects for decades. Their whole economy is fossil fuel dependent. 5, it doesn't spill up. Other ecosystems check and species can migrate in to fill their role. 6, bio is not existential. Caribia and Carza 18. Wood 11, hard to imagine in data with identify the threshold rules do not point to existential risk. Those are small scale experiments or local observations. Those are not existential. There's little biody is even declining at local scales. Local and regional biody is saying the same species from elsewhere replace local losses. No one is forecasting loss of 90% species. If global biody were have what would be the mechanism for end of civilization. 7, the only warrant is the potential end of civilization on Easter Island. So many numbers, including every country that underwent industrialization. 8, literally no reason why Alaska is key. All says the salmon and birds live there. Arctic War. 1, no shifting geopolitical incentives. Random between the Russian Poland is not going to cut it. Russia is too busy in Ukraine to fight the U.S. and Arctic. Implication is no scenario. 2, other melting ice can't solve global warming broadly, which they can't overcome. I.e. China and India emissions. 3, no Arctic War. 2 is 20. Stakes in a changing Arctic are not high enough to warrant great power conflict. Remains unlikely. Force will be used. Competition between Russia and NATO reflect Eastern or Southern Europe. Russia's build up is safeguarding traditional interests. China's ambitious mining minimis in East Asia. European states are unprepared to substitute advanced spins reflect U.S. retrenchment, and European and leading champions, the Norwegian government public filming along with exaggerated reporting contributed to imprudent claims and unfounded assumptions about likelihood of conflict. 4, no disease impacting COVID thumbs. Agile 16. Headline disease are not for any humanity control diseases and vaccination therapies outside of fiction. No reason why pathogens were in human race. Analysts suggest any marker reaching extinction on threat. Unlikely pathogens so unfamiliar. No therapy. Why transmissibility for disease so means these are immune system most complex one can call the genetic generation. Any disease leave large populations alive. Mark at large population alive.
The T-shell, I guess, can you explain what specific disads from, or etc. that you've lost?
Yes, so disads require a large shift from the status quo, i.e. if I wanted to read the elections disad, it would be premised on it having a large enough effect on things. It also diminishes links to the disads that I...
The prohibit definition, why is this contextualized to federal lands and waters? Have you read a single piece of ONC evidence that says that prohibit means all federal lands and waters? Because this card just implies putting a stop, but if the app does put a complete stop to the extraction within the Willow project, why does that not meet the
I think that prohibit modifies, like, the United States ought to prohibit the extraction.
The decision comes first, then...
I explained this at the top of the interp, the extempted. I said, if fossil fuel extraction still exists in the world of the app, it's not a complete stop. That's why I think that prohibit requires it to be all lands.
The evidence just says that prohibit implies putting a stop.
Yes, but I explained and contextualized that evidence to mean that when it says a complete stop, if fossil fuel extraction still continues.
The biodiversity, actually, the Ukraine stuff, if the plan is in executive action that doesn't affect PC at all or go through the Congress, how is there a link?
Because Biden gets blamed for it because it's the executive branch, i.e. Biden's branch.
So is there a perception-based, i.e. that Biden passing any climate-based policy is enough to trigger the link?
I think specifically the way we've read evidence that indicates
evidence that says specifically the Willow project is...
The Yay evidence says that there's widespread support for the Willow project, that all 3 Alaskan congressmen wanted to do it, and that there's support from both parties. Like, I think that's pretty clear.
Why would other actions like the IRA not have thumbed this? Why would like Biden rejoining the Paris Climate Accords and not have thumbed this? Because if Republicans are like anti-climate, then why?
1, contextual to the Willow project, and 2, it's contextual to bans. 3, I think that we're specifically talking about the current Ukraine aid package. So like Biden rejoining Paris was years ago, which isn't specific, and I think that that would cost political capital in the past.
Okay, sure.
But not related to the situation.
Econ, is the link just like Willow saves money?
The link is like that it has jobs and like it increases oil production. Yeah. And that it generates $17 billion in revenue and it increases energy. Politics.
Sure. Status of the counter plan.
Status quo is always a logical option.
Okay. I guess which 34 states are going to be potentially?
I don't know, at least 34 of them.
Okay.
I don't think I have to specify that.
So they're just like actors that we don't know doing the plan?
No, they're not doing the plan. They're petitioning for a constitutional convention.
So these are like random actors that...
Not random actors, they're 34 of the 50 states.
You can't name them, then I don't know why they're not random.
Could be any of them. Like, I could give you a list right now, but I think it's kind of pointless. It doesn't really change anything. You want me to list 34 states? Like, all right.
Taken 2 minutes left. We'll send out clock. She didn't switch back.
Alright, what's the order, Amanda?
It'll be T, case, Ukraine
Hold
decide,
on 1 second.
Econ decide, ConCon.
1 sec.
Sorry.
I'm gonna need you to repeat that in just a second. Okay, so it's T and then what? Okay, T.
Willow, Ukraine, Econ.
So T, Willow.
Actually, sorry, I'll do T, case, ConCon, Ukraine.
What's the order on case?
Econ. It'll be extension of the first, the second advantage, and then like line by line of like 1 and 2.
Okay, so second advantage. Arctic, so it's T, the sort of Arctic War, and then is it
Ukraine,
okay, ConCon, ConCon, Ukraine, Econ. Let me just see your timer.
Sorry, what's the word on case? Advantage 2 and then the 1 and C top down.
Oh, wait.
Like, I'm gonna do it first.
Okay, I'm ready.
The T-page counter-interpretation prohibits doesn't need to be on Washington Courts of Appeals 19. Prohibit means hinder. Hinder is just a prohibition and not be all or nothing. Courts means the same thing. And a weapon is a prohibition of a substance isn't a prohibition. Substance is permitted and defined in water means that we need to be in out of 10. General statements for little evidence to be judged. Huge dispute and misleading with the rest of the only one person actually curious. Only a minority lay eggs, but first lay eggs is uncontroversial pragmatics. That way, when it's arbitrary linguistic intuitions, transpredictability and persistent mental collapses because since the value to accuracy is to be foreign, not assuming sufficiently predictable. Interpret the topic means division of ground is more important for one's innovation. Spec forces he wants debates about specific lands and their implications, spaces versus recycled non-germane debates about legitimacy and renewables. 2 is pace next substitution beats every app advantage and worse because the engineers will force to 1 year research 3 functional with 0 cases and all advantages will have the same internal links and prohibiting instructions, so cutting specific links with the same uniqueness and impact solves and force engineers, econ, energy, independence, of politics, face out carbon tax, and tendencies all apply to every app and remove 5 is recent ability to just go to get back to substance and so it's not arbitrary case. I'm going for the article advantage lack of infrastructure interest, great power grabs over essential oil assets that as the tensions that makes me more inevitable. All the time that when I see Baker evidence post Ukraine, China, and Russia have geopolitical ambitions for Arctic control, but U.S. capabilities ensure deterrence, and also the when I see Rampage 23 evidence here states that rational natural resources and theory that makes me more inevitable evidence by arms racing high intentions that make now the brink and the one I see top down one is all of the biology stuff. One is that Willow is not key to energy security or the Econ. Those are going to be the Econ institutions possibly the knowing because Willow just dropping the bodies and no offense from the biology page and also no shift of private the court is not contextualized to Willow and no isolation of how big private lands are going to be means that they don't get offense. The Arctic advantage top down one is no warrant for the first analytical. The one I see Baker loosely tells you why Russian China care about the Arctic. Ukraine is claiming without a warrant. And they also can see that China like for example China has literally been trying to work with Russia in order to establish control in the Arctic and to declare itself a new Arctic state, which all shows interest in the one and see two weeks are relevant because it's a question of time frame. Warming might happen in 100 years, but by then our cities are flooded and we have other issues to deal with. But Willow immediately makes black carbon flares that accelerates the melting of Arctic sea ice and 1 and C3 outdated our evidence posted there said it has specific instances of countries showing interest in the Arctic and how that escalates to your instability, and it tells you that conventional deterrence theory is not applicable to the Arctic, which is what their evidence is in the context for 1 and C4. I'm not going for disease, just the worst scenario. ConCon. 1 is primitive bushels because ConCon overshadows the plan. 2 is do the primitive counterplan. 3 is do the counterplan through the process of the counterplan. 4 is that it can't solve it, obliterates certainty, can't solve it, links to politics. Greenberg 18. There is nothing to prevent it. Health management being expanded in application to motor conventions, special armies, but open and constitution, gerrymandering, and polarization. There are no rules in common. Eventual when we have and responsible for legal disposition, judicial and legislative executive authority opening the process to chaos and protracted battles that threaten democracy and uncertainty. There is no process versus application and endless can't solve it litigation. Welcome 16. The illegal issue of whether a convention may be limited, may not be, and could not be definitively resolved on this state. 8 forms, including lawsuits that can take years and lead to arbitrary results. And Congress vetoes easily rapid 10. Amendment provision allows Congress to amend the Constitution and provides no other method. Congress is only to the Constitution to be amended to limit its power for the court of power. And the counterplan cuts off the second amendment because of 6 states checking Biden and a limited ConCon is a voting issue. States say no one runaway amendment is for after the Ukraine is that. 1 is a no-link. Willow is a small project. There was no reason why Willow specifically stopped to be advising PC2 is a no-link because the plan is executive action from the element non-legislative, which doesn't cycle PC, and 3 is a no-link because the A23 might be Willow, but their trade-off part is not, which means the link is iffy and should be tiny. It just says that, and the A23 code just says that Willow might boost the economy. That means that Willow cross over the answers on Econ, and also no internal link, slow passage, sworn bipartisan Jackson 23. Currently, U.S. is going for 96% of 60 billion, and Johnson announced Ukraine will come into U.S. border first, and ongoing counter to moving at a slower pace and beginning to provide Ukraine with smaller packages in order to push support, and aid doesn't pass. Prince 23. The U.S. is unable to pass Republican support wins in each, but we do that possibility gets harder and harder. The window is closing. Republicans control the House, cut the guard at House, and go to Econ, and nobody else will judge thumbs. They're going to give $2 billion. Econ decide. 1 is a no link. With the drop in the market for national instruction, none of their evidence is specific to the average. No one why this one project is key to fossil fuel assets or national production to sustain the entire economy, and also time frame because they still only made $5 million in 23. Cost for more than it would raise in the global spread, even a loss of $1 billion over 10 years, billions of dollars. Is expected despite what after the tax was elsewhere, and the cash positive in 2035 generate $5.4 billion.
Okay, it's 5 minutes prep, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll start that now. You read A, B, and C on the Econ, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And the only drop to the bear was ConCon, right?
Yeah.
Okay. read the aid won't pass, and if it does, it'll be watered down?
Yeah.
It's gonna be the Ukraine thing, the Econ, the ConCon, and the app, Ukraine.
Is there two?
No. Okay, yeah, so it's Ukraine, Econ, ConCon.
Okay. No. Okay. Let me just set timer. The one error he's conceded our impact scenario, which is the decent evidence from the 1NC, which specifically warns that U.S. action is key in order to deter future action from adversarial powers, and that a strategy of appeasing Russia will fail and embolden them, just like appeasement failed to contain Hitler before World War II. And they have conceded this evidence, so you should treat it as automatically true. Independently, they have also dropped the delays in U.S. aid literally embolden Russia. This is the Prince evidence. You know it's qualified because she read it for you in a different form in the 1AR. It specifically says that each week that passes, the ability to give Ukraine tools to defend its territory and make advances is getting worse, which means that as more time goes on and as aid gets delayed more and more, that you know that it will cause Russia to win, and you know that it will be perceived as a failure to back credibility. The impact is that it emboldens adversaries, and that it causes conflict with countries like China, and that it emboldens future actions from countries like Russia, which is the decent evidence and the and also the Prince evidence from the 1NC. You should treat this with 100% probability because it has been conceded, which means that the threshold is just winning an internal link to the impact scenario. Independently, is that it outweighs on magnitude and turns the case it outweighs because the impact is nuclear war and makes all of their scenarios inevitable, because you know that if these countries are seeing that the U.S. is not a credible deterrent, if the U.S. will not deter them from doing action, then things like Arctic war become inevitable in the world of the app, because you know that they're still going to think, look, they didn't help Ukraine, they let Ukraine lose, they let Russia take Ukraine, which means that land grabs are okay now. That will cause countries to sort of fight each other and will make all of their Arctic war stuff inevitable. Independently, it outweighs on time frame. They have read evidence too that indicates that as time goes on, that these things become more likely, which means it is try or die for the negative. I'll do the line by line here. First, they say this sort of argument about, they say there's no link and that Willow is small, but yes, there is a link. Yes, says that all three of the Alaskan congressmen support it, from the Republicans and the Democrats, which means that you should put this argument at a very low threshold. This logically means that the plan is unpopular, as Biden was literally lobbied to do it. Even if it is small, the perception of it, which is the Lavelle evidence, which I'll extend after this, means that it definitely does have a link. On the second no link argument, they say that it's executive action, but that just means that they link even harder. Our internal links are about Biden and the executive branch, which means that it still messes with his attempt to lobby in Congress about it. The first piece of uniqueness evidence from the 1NC indicates specifically that Biden is the one proposing this and that Biden's action is key. First, on the sort of next argument where they say that it's only about Willow and it's about the Econ and that it's iffy, but the trade-off card also works. So I'll extend it here. Lavelle specifically says that even if bans are a small amount, that it's perceived as a larger action will be taken as a larger blow than it really is. Even if it's only Willow, lawmakers perceive the act as part of a larger step to ban fossil fuels because it is seen as something that Biden is forwarding. But the Yale link should still be sufficient on its own because it shows there's bipartisan consensus. Next, they say it just says that people think Willow boosts the economy and means that the response is on the Econ cross-apply, but that doesn't mean that people don't want it. If they think it boosts the economy, it doesn't matter if it actually does because it's a perception-based scenario. On this sort of no internal link argument and that slow war passage, wrong, this is uniqueness for us. All the evidence says is that Congress wants it to pass, which is the slow, but it doesn't assume the political backlash from the plan, which was the link debate. Next, they say that it won't pass, and if it does, it'll be watered down, but no, that's wrong. This, by the way, is the card I read in the 1NC. It just proves why now is key and it supercharges my link. It says nothing about it being watered down, just that the longer it takes to pass it, the more it will be watered down, which you know means that it definitely does have a link, and this supercharges our impact. They say the Dutch check. This is a backwards argument, which is kind of silly, especially as the U.S. is the largest supporter, the U.S. is the largest supporter, which is the sort of the Prince evidence, which says that the U.S. is by far Ukraine's largest supporter of weapons. You know that you should evaluate this because they have read the same author, which means that they agree with the premise of the article. They have read the exact same sort of article from the same source, which means that you know that this warrant flows through, and the Dutch do not check because it is only a small amount. They are one of the supporters, but the U.S. is the main superpower, which needs to be able to endorse it. On the sort of ConCon stuff, I'm not going for ConCon, but I'll concede the terms of the test of competition, but on this sort of limited ConCon as a voting issue, the counterinterpretation is that we get limited ConCon. The net benefit is arbitrariness. There's no reason why this is necessarily bad and no warrant, which means you cannot vote on this argument in the 2 hour. Additionally, drop the argument solves. You should default to that because they have not given you a paradigm issue on it. On the sort of Econ Econ thing. I'll concede that there's no link to it and that Willow is a drop in the bucket, which means that there is no risk of this in the first place. I'll also concede the time frame stuff, which means that it won't make enough money and that it will not do anything, which means that it does not have internal link to this. Independently, if you think that there is offense here, they don't have any because it is only a small amount of money, which means it's not enough to trigger a complete decline of the economy. On the sort of T thing, just in case, because she asked as the order, I'm paranoid, but independently, you should not vote on RBI, even if there was one. I don't think there was, but because it's illogical and encourages baiting theory, which crowds out substance, and so you should concede reasonability as a reason why an RBI would be bad. On the sort of Ukraine again, you know that we flow through with an impact because it was dropped, and you also know they have no offense. I'll go on to the sort of case page here on the case. The problem is that they have conceded the first card in the 1 and C, which indicates that Willow will not start drilling for 10 plus years. You know that means that the brink for these impacts are very low, and you also know the scope is low. They say there's no warrants for this sort of analytics about it, and that it concedes that, and Ukraine is a claim without a warrant, but we have read qualified evidence that indicates Ukraine is happening, which means that they do not have a scenario. They have not engaged with the substance of this argument, which means that it flows through. You know that their impacts are slower on time frame, whereas ours are immediate. You know that additionally, they have really badly mishandled the Weber evidence, which was at the top. Additionally, you know this is from the BioD stuff, but it cross applies to the other flow because it means that it specifically will not come for a few years, and that's from the company doing the project, so it doesn't matter. On the sort of Arctic War stuff, they say that the no melting ice thing is key here because it means Willow doesn't have it, which means there's no Arctic War, and if there is, then it takes too long and we turn it before they access it. And additionally, we didn't concede this geopolitical stuff. It just says there's no incentive for it because the countries are busy and don't want to fight. One second. Okay, let me just set a timer. All right, I'm ready.
Here's how you should be writing your ballot. You should vote affirmative because case massively outweighs any risk of the because the countries are too busy and don't have an incentive, but we have literally read you evidence from the 1AC, like 1AC Baker, that tells you that they do have an incentive because of the minerals and resources within the Arctic. For example, if they didn't have interest, why would China try to declare itself a near-Arctic state? Why would Russia demand that Alaska get returned to Russian sovereignty? Why would China and Russia be partnering over sustainable trade routes in the Arctic? These are all examples from the 1AC evidence that prove that there is an incentive for Arctic escalation that is not contested by the by the two and because they're just like, oh, they don't have an incentive, but this was an analytic in the 1AC and does not have evidence to back it up, which means we have a full risk of the advantage they vanish us, and the U.S. readiness is key to preventing great power war from escalating and going nuclear. This is a perception-based argument because if countries like China and Russia perceive the U.S. to be militarily unready, then they're going to be incentivized to make their moves and take control over the Arctic because they have a high incentive now, which means it's a perception-based scenario that gets triggered immediately. That means it dumps all of their arguments about like Willow happening in like 10 years because it's about whether China or Russia perceive the U.S. to be ready or not in the Arctic, and the Willow project completely decks military readiness because it admits black carbon plans that decks military adaptation means that we don't have enough time to build back Arctic dominance, and we physically don't have infrastructure in place now, which China and Russia know, i.e. the response time, the maritime capabilities, etc. are all extremely low. That was in the hiding 23 evidence and it's conceded, which proves that it doesn't matter if Arctic stars like the drilling happens in like 10 years because it's a perception-based argument on how Russia and China perceive the app. So that means no further extension defense on the app scenario means we should completely get full risk of the app advantages because they've not contested that. For example, China and Russia have incentives right now because they're just like, oh, they don't have an incentive, they're too busy. That is not an argument. Time frame should, we'll agree that time frame is the way that you should frame your ballot, i.e. that the app happens immediately, but Ukraine decides based on the ongoing conflict that has been happening for years, which means that Ukraine, it has like an even lower probability of spilling over to get to their impacts, and that means that the case should turn to this, because before the second turn the case, because they say Arctic, like their impacts make Arctic war inevitable, and no, Arctic war makes their impacts inevitable, because you know what really make Russia want to further attack Ukraine if they were in the middle of like an Arctic war, and there was a lot of geopolitical tensions, and that means that Arctic war and conflict with the US would make their impacts inevitable either way, because we're just deflate into great power war. And on the disapp page, here's the issue with the two and are they a virtuous scenario that says Biden's PC is the key internal link into the disapp can see that the plan does not trade off the PC because it doesn't go through Congress. Two and our contextualization is about two Alaskan congressmen that don't like the two Alaskan politicians that don't like the Willow project. That is not enough to offset the fact that the one is link is premised off of Biden's PC being tanked. One is that they say executive action is harder but have not explained this. The plan does not go through Congress and reaches no link, and even if two politicians do not like that is not enough to stop the entirety of Biden's PC. And two is that they can see that their actual trade-off evidence is not about the Willow project but about any climate forward policy, which means that there are infinite numbers in this because any climate forward policy should have been enough to trade off like the IRA, the Paris Climate Accord, etc. Any climate friendly policy should have done the disapp because their trade-off evidence is not contextualized to the Willow project. The evidence is about two congressmen. How is two people enough to take the entirety of Biden's PC when continue drilling and literally anywhere else in the world would stop the one is the environment to a single piece of evidence that tells you why Alaska is the key internal to Biden's PC writ large and how two Congress people are going to solve this. So perception wasn't going to see 200 grants and it was you and case outweighs.
Good bit.
decide terms and always the case. Decide is perception-based, which means that as soon as the plan gets passed, Ukraine is not able to pass, which emboldens Russia. The app takes too long because the Willow project is super slow to actually cause physical drilling. The way that the app has characterized the app through the entirety of the debate is that that Arctic War happens when ice melts. So I don't understand this new two-way pivot to it being like perception-based, because I just don't think that's true, and I think it's like too new, which means that I buy the neg argument that drilling doesn't happen for the next like 10 years, which means the decide probably happens first. I also buy the decide turns case argument about land grabs and why the app is like legitimizing Russia by allowing it to get Ukraine, which means it will go into the Arctic and like try and get the Arctic. The decide page, I don't really think the app is interacting with the negatives argument, because about like why the plan like goes to the executive means that Biden gets blamed for the plan, which ruins his PC. The app pushback is not great and just says that the Alaskan Congress members are not the executive, but I don't think this really like answers what the negative is saying, because it's about like Biden's perception of him like betraying his party or whatever. Also, I just think the app is just wrong about the negative evidence not being contextual to the Willow project. The Yay evidence is literally all about the Willow project. The Lavelle evidence just says that why that would cause a trade-off if the Willow project like being banned is like is something that the app like actually does. Then I think that it is like the only like environment bill that's like having an impact, I guess. Or like or that's being like traded off because it's getting the Willow project is solid. Any questions?
What do you think the 2 years should have been?
I think that you could have gone for probably that. Maybe it's slow passage checks war. I don't know. I would have, or just like aid won't pass. I think that would have probably been better. Or honestly, maybe you like could have won this executive action argument. I just think you needed to interact with the negatives arguments about this one. I'm just explaining why it going through the executive means that the congressman like won't be affected or something like that. I'm sure like the truth of that though, but Anything else?
No.
What could I have done to do better, I guess?
I thought the 2 hours was quite excellent, actually. It's probably not a lot. Probably could have maybe gone for the Econ this set, but I thought this was fine.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna ask, do you think the Econ DSI would have been like more strategic or more viable, considering like she spent a whole 25 seconds on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could have gone for, I thought you were gonna go for the Econ this set, but
Okay.
I mean, I think it's sort of fine.
Alright.